Hello fellow Unreal Engine designers and developers. In this continuing series on creating an Arctic forest, we're going to create a campsite by simply using free assets available on the Unreal Engine marketplace. So let's get straight into it. Firstly, I want to apologise for the long delay since the publishing of my last video. I've been dealing with a family health emergency here over the last couple of months, and that's been my priority, as you probably understand. But we're back on an even keel now, and so hopefully I'll get back on a regular weekly schedule of publishing videos. I'd like to thank you all for continuing to subscribe and watch my videos in my absence. I love you all for that, and hopefully everything will be getting back to normal. So that being said, the first thing we're going to do, well, what we're going to do in this tutorial today is to create a campsite. And this is a very simple tutorial, really just finding free assets on the marketplace and then placing them in our scene. So nothing too strenuous today, but it's a good tutorial for me to get back into the swing of things. So that being said, let's start off by looking at getting a campervan into our scene. And for this, I'm going to use a vehicle pack from the marketplace. So if I switch over to the Unreal marketplace and search for vehicle variety, and I want vehicle variety pack volume 2. Vehicle variety pack volume 1 I've used in the past. There was an SUV in there which I used for my desert driving series, and then in the last 2 or 3 months they released this volume 2 as well, and we're going to be using this campervan here. Now these are fully drivable vehicles. We're not going to be driving them in the Arctic forest. It's just going to be a prop, but they're well put together with sort of nice materials as well. So you need to download that first, and once you download it, you can't add it to the project directly. The first thing you're going to need to do is to create a project. So click on that to create a project, give it whatever name you want. And then you'll find in your library of projects, you'll find the new project you've created. So open that up. And once you've opened it, do Control Space to go into the Explorer, and you want to find the meshes folder. So within content, vehicle variety volume 2 meshes, here are the 4 vehicles. So we want the campervan. So right click on the campervan, asset actions, migrate, and that'll migrate all of the mesh and associated materials, and click on OK, and then find your project. So mine's called Arctic Camp, content, and click on, actually go back up to one, click on just content, select folder, and it says content migration completed successfully. So if we close down this project now and go back into our original project, we should find our vehicle variety volume 2 there with materials, meshes and textures, and there's our campervan. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to find somewhere to put it. So let's move around. What I want to do is just find an area of forest with a bit of a clearing. So let's go over here. Let's drop down. And we want it to be sort of flattish area. So that's over here, looks pretty good. Yeah, how about there? So let's first of all place our campervan in place. Now you should have collision set for your foliage, i.e. the trees. So let's just check that's the case. If we go into foliage, the foliage for the trees, and let's find the foliage spawner here. So browse to that, open it up, and the foliage type we were using, browse to that, open it up, and let's just check if we go down to collision preset. So you want to make sure it says block all. So if you're if you haven't got collision set to block all here, you want to do that. It obviously stops your player running through the trees as well, but as we scatter things around here, it'll stop them intersecting with the trees. So let's do that first of all and check that, and then we can now place our camper van in place. So I'm going to go back to the Explorer, find our vehicle variety volume mesh, and I'm going to just drag it in here. You can see it takes a little bit of time just to prepare the shader. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift it above the ground slightly. Let's just move around, make sure it is within the trees, which it is. Okay. And just make sure it's not intersecting with the ground at all. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use physics temporarily just to drop it into place. So with your camper van selected, go to the physics section and simulate physics, and just click on mass of 100 kilograms, doesn't really matter mass. And then if you go into the play mode and do simulate, give it a second, and you see it sort of moves around. Obviously it's slightly on a hill here, so just see where it ends up. I mean, that's okay. That's fine. So you might need to do it a couple of times. Now, if I press stop now, it'll reset to above the ground. So once you're happy with where it is, you can right click and do keep simulation changes, or just press the K key on the keyboard. Okay, and now you see it said a quick message saved state. And that's what we're going to do with our other props as well. We're going to sort of scatter them around so they do actually end up on the ground properly. Okay, so that's our camper van. Let's move on now and look at creating some other props in the campsite. Before we scatter our props around, we need to find a selection of free props from the marketplace. So let's go back there, and what I'll do is I'll go into the permanently free collection, and if I search tags for props and scroll down a little bit, there is this industry props pack 6 for free. So click on that, and then what I can do is download it if you haven't done so already. You can see it's got things we need, like some sort of cans, sort of oil cans, so pallets which we'll use for a campfire, and various other things. You can use whatever props pack you want. If you've got other ones with other more useful assets in there, by all means download them and use them. So click on download and then click add to project, click on your project name and add it. And once it's added, go back to your project and you should find a new folder in here called industry props pack. So meshes, you can see here various bits and pieces which we can use. So what I'm going to do is I'm first of all going to put a pallet in here which I'm going to set fire to later as the campfire. So let's drag this pallet up into place. Just drag it up slightly, and if you hit the end key, that'll place it on the ground. And with the other ones, we're going to do something similar to what we did with the physics simulation for the camper van. We're going to sort of place it roughly where we want and then allow physics to sort of drop it into place. That'll give it a little bit more of a realistic view. So let's come over here and select a couple of things. Maybe we'll do a couple of boxes here. So let's do a box. Yeah, put it up slightly. Maybe duplicate that. So hold down Alt and drag one over here. Let's put in a is there a sort of oil can around here or barrel? Yeah, let's put a barrel here. Put that over here. Anything else we would like? Maybe tarpaulin. Anyway, whatever you want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select each of these items that's hovering in the air. So I'm using shift to select them. I'm leaving the palette because I dropped that onto the ground. And then in the physics section of your detail here, do simulate physics, mass 100 kilograms. And as before, we will go into simulate. And it drops down. Our cans are rolling off down the hill, but that's fine. I'll leave that in the distance. And again, if you're not happy with it, you can escape. In fact, let's try that. Do escape and everything gets reset. So let's take that oil can and let's move it into the foreground a bit. Yeah, something like that. Maybe it won't roll off now. Okay, and let's do simulation again. Okay, and this time it just rests against the wheel of the van. So what we want to do is we want to keep this simulation for all of those items. So make sure if they're not all selected, you select them all. And this time we'll just press K for saving the state. You saw the message there, saved state for 4 actors. Now when I escape, those items stay where they are. And what we can do now, in fact, is we can get rid of the simulate physics for those items. So make sure that you've stopped the simulation and then you can uncheck the simulate physics for each of those items. It just saves a bit of processing because we don't want it to be doing physics simulation. Same for the Campervan. Now they're in place. Okay, so we now have our props, and obviously you can put a few more around here. You might want to put some rocks in here as well, like we did in an earlier episode. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a campfire, set fire to our palette. So for our fire, we're going to use a particle system from the starter pack. So go into the browser, add feature or content pack. And if you go to the content tab here, starter content, click add to project, and that will import the starter content. And you can see here, there is all of these elements here: audio, blueprints, materials, particles. If you go to particles, you will see within here there is this fire. Now it's using the cascade particle system, which is a very old particle system, but to be honest, it's still a good fire. It has lots of different elements. It has the flames, sparks, bit of smoke, and even a bit of heat distortion. So I see no problem with using that. In the next episode, we'll be going right to the current Niagara fluid simulation for our jet engine fire. So these are the two ends of the spectrum. So with this one selected, fire, just drag it into the window. Let's just drop it here for now. We'll put it in the right place in a minute. So close down these sections and then let's just move it into place. And you can see it's quite an authentic fire, even though it is using the old system. As I said, it's got little sparks, bit of smoke, bit of heat haze as you get up close as well. So so that looks pretty good. And so the last thing I want to add in on this campsite is I want to change the material on the ground so that we've got a bit of a forest floor. So where the fire is, I want the snow to melt and a bit of a forest path. So let's do that now. So for the final part of today's video, we're going to change the texture on the ground around the fire to sort of create a sort of a melted forest floor, and we'll continue that on to create a sort of a path around the camper van as well. So in order to do that, we need to go into the landscape mode and into paint, and what we'll do is we'll use the sand layer here. So sand alpha layer, you'll need to go down and select the layer info so that it's got something to paint onto. And although we'll be painting using the sand material that comes with open land, we'll change the material in a moment to a forest floor from Quixel Bridge. Now, as you can see at the moment, the brush is rather large, so let's go up here and let's reduce the brush size to maybe even less than that, 200. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll start to and use the brush fall off of 1 so that it feathers into the surrounding icy snow texture. So we'll start where the fire is and just paint a little bit. You'll see it'll go a bit funny to start off with. Give it a few seconds to catch up. If you continue to have problems with a weird looking texture, then best thing to do is to just go back to the main mode, save, and then reload your level. So go to your level and reload it. And you can see now I've reloaded the map that the textures have restored back to where they were, and I can see a bit of the sand around here. So let's go back into landscape mode, paint, brush size 200, brush fall off 1, and let's continue to paint around here. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll just give a sort of an area around the fire to start off with, and then what I'll do is I'll bring it forward, and let's move back a bit, and I'll continue to draw down through the forest. You can take your time on this, and if you want to erase anything, you can use shift while you paint, and that will get rid of it. So you can erase stuff if you want to as well. So I'm just painting here. Maybe I'll do a path going this way as well. And I'm not going to do much more on this. You might want to take it through the woods a bit more. At the moment it's a sand texture, but we're going to change it in a second to the forest floor texture. So let's do that now. Let's go back to our select mode and do a quick save where we are. It'll do this sort of stepped effect temporarily while it saves before it restores back to the nice smooth gradients. Okay, so let's change the texture now. So we don't want sand, we want forest floor. If I don't want to see this particle icon here, if you press G on the keyboard as you've selected the viewport, it will get rid of any of those widgets. So you might want to do that just so you can see the scene without any overlays. Right, now let's change the texture here. So let's go to Quixel Bridge. So go into add content, Quixel Bridge, and search for rocky forest floor. And the one I've used, if I can find it here, is this one here. So it's if I select it, you can see it's a sort of brown soil with some stones and roots showing through there. So select that, download it. I've already downloaded it in my PC, and then I've chosen high quality. There is a highest quality, but yeah, I think high quality is sufficient. And then just click on add, and that will add it into your into your project. And notice that these are set to virtual textures at the moment, because we used virtual texturing when we did our blending. We don't want virtual texturing for our or virtual textures for our landscape textures. So select these three, right click and do convert to regular texture. Click OK. If you don't do that, you'll get some kind of strange looking textures on the ground. So let's come out of here, come out of bridge. And now what we need to do is we need to change this sand layer to use that new texture. So to do that, go to the open land widgets and make sure the open land megascan texture widget, make sure you run that. You may have done this before in an earlier tutorial, in which case you'll end up with a widget that looks like this. Yours might be in the middle of the screen, so you can dock it. And what we can now do is we can choose the sand layer, and what we want to do is use our rocky forest floor as texture. So click on that to select it and click the select button, and you see now our texture has changed to the rocky forest floor, but the tiling doesn't look right close up here. It looks a bit large, so let's change the near tiling to 1. Okay, and that looks better to me. So now it's sort of in keeping with the stones in the surrounding soil. And the other thing we can do here as well is we can give it some variation in color. So let's take this tint variation intensity and let's bring that up, and you can see what it's done. There's some dark patches in here, some light patches, but overall it blends in quite well. So you can see that it looks like the sort of snow is melted underneath the fire, and it does look like there's some paths here, but you can play around with this and use whatever texture you want. So we're pretty much done here. Let's do a quick save. And the final thing I'm going to do is a bit of organization at the end. Let's take all of these meshes that we created today, so all of the props that we put in. So I'm using Shift to select all of them, and I'm also use Control to add the fire as well, and right click and move to a new folder, and we'll call this campsite. And that way we've got all of the elements we created today nicely stored away in a folder for organizational means. So that's it for today's tutorial. Now you can go ahead and add more elements in here if you want. You can add more props. You might want to add, as I said earlier, some rocks using a procedural foliage volume, and you may also want to add some mists, as we showed in the last episode. So that could be either planar mist if you're doing cinematics, or some volumetric mist if you want it in game. But in the next episode we'll do something a bit more involved. We're going to create the plane crash site, and in that tutorial we're going to go the sort of extreme from this cascade particle simulation and go to the latest Niagara fluid simulation to do the jet engine fire. We'll also create a snowstorm using Niagara particles, and we'll use some decals for footprints leading away from the crash site. So stay tuned for that one. It should be here within a week or so. Thanks for your continued support, and I will see you in the next one.